my research began with a simple question, which is, what's happening when literature collides with music? There'd been a fair amount of research on this topic, and much of it I found somewhat unsatisfactory with respect to the ways that it was talking about the actual music. In this question, I'm thinking about literature not only as words on the page, but also as it encompasses a wide variety of cultural practices: reading, writing, sharing books, interactions with publishers, basically everything that goes into making words into worlds that we can read about. And likewise, as I think about music, I consider music as organized sound, and also the way that it circulates in live performances, commercial recordings, printed sheet music, and informal jam sessions. I wanted to focus on the years between 1900 and 1960 for a few reasons. First of all, this was a time where there was kind of a landmark shift in how music was being distributed and it was circulating, from sheet music and live performance toward commercial recordings, and recording becoming the primary distribution method. Second, there were shifts in musical performance paradigms and the organization of musical culture as well during this period, especially towards cabarets and nightclubs becoming really central locations for people to hear music and encounter music. And third, there was a profusion of literature in the United States during this era that was exploring these changes in music and linking them explicitly to the attachments among people that went across social boundaries of race and class. My project examines canonical authors and artists like James Weldon Johnson, John Rosamond Johnson, Willa Cather, Louis Armstrong, Ethel Waters, Ralph Ellison, and John Coltrane, and then also some folks that we don't hear very much about outside of the music world, such as Edith Wilson, Philippa Schuyler, and George Russell. So with the Dean's Grant, and I had a Bev Sears grant, I was really lucky to have one of those last year as well, I've started to do some of this research, and this summer I'm going to take a journey to almost all of these archives. In these archives, what I'm looking for is personal correspondence, unpublished drafts, annotated sheet music, correspondence with editors, correspondence with friends and family, music reviews and photos, non-circulating recordings, and performance programs. What I look for in these materials, which are really impossible to get unless we are actually in the archive, is a sense of how people are imagining and enacting their musical and literary craft in relation to their identities and their political positioning. This slide offers a very brief visual description of one of my chapters as I follow the song "What Did I Do to Be So Black and Blue," which was famously composed after Andy Razaf had a gun put to his head by a mob boss, and the show was moving downtown from Harlem to downtown New York City. So I follow the song from its composition through its performance on the stage by Edith Wilson, its famous recording by Louis Armstrong, and then onto the pages of Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, where in that position it becomes the master trope for one of the iconic representations of African American literature in the 20th century. And finally, the provisional findings that I've got so far, and these are the things I'm going to try to tease out more as I'm in the archives, are as follows. First, the role that music played in the popular and literary imagination during the era that I studied goes far beyond lyrics, which are often the focus of studies. What I'm finding is that individual pieces and genres, and especially instrumental music, were becoming sonic environments that are crucial for conceptions of love, romance, and intimacy. Secondly, I see an increasingly well-articulated sense throughout the period of a tension between music as an individual emotional expression and music as the expression of a group identity, such as race or nation. And third, one of the things that I've found is that special collections and archives are amazingly rich, but the silences often tell us a lot about what was not valued enough to save. So it's important to consider what's not there as well. The materials within them are crucial to a project like mine that's trying to find out what's going on behind the scenes of literary and musical production. And just as an example, in Philippa Schuyler's annotated piano notebooks, on one of the sheets of technical exercises, parallel thirds up and down the keyboard, she writes that she wanted to be the greatest woman pianist in all of the world. And she capitalized that and underlined it twice. What I pull from that is a sense of this really tightly knit relation between her sense of success as an instrumentalist and her gender identity. And what I'm finding in the archives is that constantly I'm finding stuff like this that I wouldn't even know to look for in published scholarship. So again, thank you very much. I guess I can take a question.
Come on, somebody.
Yeah.
How did you choose the authors and musicians that you're looking at in your project?
You know, so there are a couple different ways. That's a really great question because that's one of the kind of problems and difficulties with archival research. And some of them are people who scholars always turn to in order to talk about the period. So for example, James Weldon Johnson and John Rosamond Johnson and W.B. Du Bois, who I didn't mention, are like formative for early 20th century American studies of early 20th century American music. And Ellison, likewise, is the kind of the central figure for mid-20th century studies of literature, music, and race as they come together. Other folks like Philippa Schuyler, I came across when I was in an archive and I asked a librarian, you know, I want to learn more about women instrumentalists because they are being marginalized to such an extent in the scholarship that no one's even reading about them unless they already know who to look for. And she said, oh, well, you know, we have this collection of about 40 boxes of Philippa Schuyler's writing and annotated music. And she was a child prodigy pianist. She was also a war correspondent and was biracial and thought a lot on paper about her gender identity. And so being in that archive introduced me to this person who's now part of, like a central part of the chapter of my dissertation. So those are the two ones. Thank you.